Today I'm going to tell you a story about a mail-order bride abandoned in the middle of the desert, carrying a baby waiting for someone who never came. Under the scorching sun and the cold stare of a stranger, she nearly lost all hope until a giant cowboy stepped out of the dying light. And he said just one thing: "Let me hold you both." But who was this man? And why was the whole town hiding the truth about the husband she'd never met? The train coughed a final breath of steam and rattled on, leaving Mariah Langley standing in a heat wave that shimmered off the rails like ghosts of smoke. The platform was more a suggestion than a structure. Warped boards bleached bone white, no name carved, just a crooked telegraph post leaning like it had given up. She adjusted the sleeping baby in her arms, her baby Leo, his tiny weight, the only familiar thing in this whole foreign stretch of desert. A gust of wind lifted dust off the ground, stinging her cheeks, tangling her bonnet ribbons. The sun above was merciless. There was no carriage. No smiling stranger with her name on a sign. Just a boy of about 10, fiddling with the telegraph wires and the creak of the windmill turning slow. "He's just late," she told herself. "He's coming." She sat on her valise and waited. 1 hour. Then 2. Leo stirred, his breath warm against her collarbone. Her arms were numb. Her dress clung damp to her back. Still no one. Not Jameson Carter, the man who'd written her letters full of kind promise. Who'd said he had a small ranch, a gentle temperament, and room in his heart for her and the baby. She had read those letters over and over, beneath a flickering lantern back in Ohio, clinging to each word like it was a lifeline. "I don't care about your past," he'd written. "Come west. Start over." But now, he was as absent as the shade. Mariah swallowed against the rising panic. The last time she'd trusted a man with pretty words, she ended up alone, broken with child. That mistake had nearly cost her everything. A sharp memory clawed into her mind. The schoolhouse, the smell of chalk and firewood, the headmaster's son, his weight pressing her down. They called her a liar, dismissed her in disgrace. The agency had offered a way out, a future far from scandal. But what if it had only been another lie? She shifted Leo, who whimpered now, face scrunching. She needed milk, water, a place to sit where the sun didn't bite. That's when she saw him. He moved like someone with purpose, tall and deliberate, wearing a long black coat despite the heat. A reverend's collar gleamed at his throat, though the dust hadn't touched his polished boots. His face was clean-shaven, his hair too neat for any man who'd been out in this desert for long. He stopped just a few feet away. "Miss Langley?" he asked. Her spine straightened. "Yes. I'm Reverend Elias Finch. I was sent by Mr. Carter. He regrets not being able to meet you himself. I'm to escort you to his homestead." His voice was velvet, soft like a hymn. But something in his eyes, too, still too careful, tightened her chest. "No one told me someone else would come," she said. "Surely he mentioned me in his last letter." He offered a small smile. "I assist him, spiritually, and in matters of travel." Mariah clutched Leo closer. "I'll wait here," she replied, trying to sound steady. The smile thinned. "Miss Langley, this isn't a place to linger. Not alone, and not with an infant." He tipped his hat, eyes unreadable. "Suit yourself," he said. "But don't expect kindness from strangers. Especially here." Then he turned and walked off, his steps too quiet for boots that polished. The Reverend's back faded into the golden haze, his coat dark against the dust. Mariah stood frozen, Leo fussing louder now in her arms, her heartbeat thudding dull and heavy. Something in that man's eyes, it hadn't been God she saw there. She moved to the edge of the platform, searching the horizon once more. Still no sign of Jameson Carter. No cart. No horse. Nothing but the dry wind humming like a warning. Leo began to cry in earnest, the kind of sharp, gasping wail that tore straight through a mother's chest. She shifted him to her shoulder, tried to hush him, patting with trembling hands. Her lips cracked as she whispered, "It's all right, baby. I've got you. Mama's right here." But even her voice sounded uncertain now. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows from the telegraph post across the platform. The boy had gone home. The windmill had gone still. And Mariah was beginning to feel like the only living soul left in Dry Hollow. She sat again on her valise rocking Leo, with growing desperation. Her arms ached. Her mind reeled. What if there was no Jameson Carter? What if it was all a trap? What if Reverend Finch came back with others, and this time he wouldn't ask permission? She glanced down at Leo. His face was red from crying, tiny fists flailing in distress. Her milk had dried during the last leg of the journey. He was hungry. So was she. The world began to tilt. Then boots. The sound of them. Heavy, deliberate, crunching gravel in slow steps. She turned her head. A man stood just beyond the edge of the platform. Not dressed like a reverend. Not plished. Dust clung to him like a second skin. He was taller than any man she'd seen up close, broad as a barn door, with a coat hanging open to reveal a chest strung with sinew and strength. His shirt clung damp with sweat, hair dark and wet, pushed back from a hard-boned face. A few strands curled loose at his temples. He didn't smile. He didn't speak at first. Just watched her. Those eyes, dark, sharp, and too knowing, studied her with a quiet, unreadable focus. Mariah froze. Her grip tightened on Leo. Then the man stepped forward. One pace, two. And with a voice so low it seemed pulled from the earth itself, he said, "Let me hold you both." Just that. No introductions. No questions. She flinched. What? He extended one arm, calloused, steady. Not toward her, but toward the baby. Mariah looked at Leo. He was still crying, red-faced, breath hitching. She looked back at the man. Something in her said, "Run." But something deeper, older, said, "This one is not a liar." Not slick like the Reverend. Not coded in words. Just there. Real. Her voice cracked. "I don't know you." "No," he said, "you don't." And still he waited. Not a flicker of impatience on his face. Mariah's arms trembled. Then slowly she unwrapped Leo from her chest and placed him into the stranger's hands. His arms folded around the baby with practiced care, one hand cradling the infant's neck as if he'd done it before. Leo quieted. Just like that. The man glanced back at her. "You comin' or you stayin' here?" Mariah didn't answer with words. She stood, picked up her worn valise, and followed. If this story stirred something in your heart, don't write off just yet, partner. Subscribe to our channel for more timeless tales from the dusty trails of the Old West, where love, loss, and redemption ride side by side. Because out here in Dry Hollow, every heartbeat echoes a story. The town unfurled before her like a dream drawn in mist and silence. Dry Hollow wasn't much more than a crooked row of buildings' roofs, slouched under the weight of time. Wooden signs creaked in the breeze, and horses swatted flies with tired tails outside the saloon. Colt Rivera didn't say a word as he led her through the main street. His stride was steady, wide-legged like a man used to the saddle. He carried Leo in one arm, as if the baby weighed nothing at all. His massive frame moved with surprising quiet, not a stomp, but a hush, like something shaped by mountains, not men. Mariah followed at a careful distance, one hand gripping her valise, the other ready to snatch her baby back if this turned. But every few steps she caught herself watching the way he cradled Leo. Protective, calm. The child who had wailed for hours now rested against Colt's broad chest, tiny fingers clutching the edge of his worn shirt. They stopped in front of a house with ivy curling up its side, a boarding house by the look of it. The sign above read, "Crow's Nest." A lantern flickered in the window. Colt knocked once. The door opened to reveal a woman with silver threads in her raven-black hair and lines at the corners of eyes that had seen too much. She took one look at Mariah, her travel-worn face, dust-caked dress, and the baby in Colt's arms, and something in her eyes softened, then steeled. "We're full," the woman said. Mariah's heart sank. But she added, stepping aside, "I'll make room." Colt said nothing, just handed Leo back to Mariah, with the same quiet gentleness, his warm hands brushing hers. She took the baby instinctively, though her eyes lingered on his for a second longer than she meant. "This is Delilah," he said simply. Mariah nodded, her throat dry. "Thank you." Inside, the house smelled of lavender and old pine. A small oil lamp cast golden light on lace curtains, and a worn Bible open on the table. It felt. Delilah didn't ask questions. She simply showed Mariah to a room in the back, small but fine. The bed had a quilt. The pitchers had water. As Mariah laid Leo down to rest, she heard the faint frisk of boots outside of the door. She opened it to find Colt still standing in the hallway, his hat in his hand and a small tin plate in the other. On it sat a chunk of cornbread, a strip of dried meat, and a tin cup filled with something buzzul. Delilah said the boy might take goat's milk. He said, not quite looking at her. Mariah's throat tightened. It had been hours since she'd eaten. Leo even longer. She reached for the plate, her fingers brushing his, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. "You'll be all right here," Colt said gently, eyes flickering to her face, not staring, but seeing. Like he was reading something beneath her skin, behind her eyes. Mariah hesitated. "Why did you help me?" He met her gaze. His voice was low, steady. "Because I seen what happens when no one does." Then he tipped his head, once turned, and walked away down the dim hallway, boots barely whispering against the floorboards. Maria stood there a moment longer, watching him disappear into shadow, a giant wrapped in silence. Then she stepped back into the room, set the plate down, and whispered, "Thank you," though he was no longer there to hear it. The morning came with the smell of dust and biscuits. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains in golden stripes. Leo slept curled against her side belly, full for once. Maria let her eyes linger on his peaceful face before slipping from the bed. Downstairs, the boarding house creaked with the quiet rhythm of early hours. Delilah was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, humming something low and mournful. Mariah hadn't taken more than 2 steps into the parlor when the front door opened with a sharp creak. A gust of hot air swept in, followed by the solid frame of a man in a brown duster and tin star pinned to his chest. Sheriff Amos Pike. His gray mustache twitched as he removed his hat and stepped inside. His boots thudded against the wood like punctuation. "Well now," he drawled, eyes landing square on Mariah. "You must be the new arrival." She stiffened, folding her arms instinctively. "Yes, sir." He looked her over, not with warmth, but with calculation. Like he was sizing up a horse he didn't trust. "Traveling alone with a baby," he murmured, voice dipped in judgment. "Not many women do that. Not unless they're running from something." Mariah said nothing. Her fingers dug into her elbows. Delilah stepped in from the kitchen, apron dusted with flour. "She's my guest, Sheriff. She needs rest, not questions." Pike gave her a slow smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I hear you came in with Colt Rivera," he said, turning back to Mariah. "That true?" Mariah hesitated. "He helped me at the station." The sheriff nodded, but his tone held an edge. "Strange man, that one. Keeps to himself. Apache blood, you know. Folks round here don't take kindly to his kind getting involved where they ain't asked." Delilah stepped forward, jaw tight. "Colt's done more for this town than most." "Maybe so." Pike tipped his hat again, though the gesture felt hollow. "Still, a woman with no man to claim her, and a baby nobody recognizes, It stirs talk. Be mindful what doors you knock on, Miss Langley. With that, he turned and left, spurs jangling softly as he vanished into the morning heat. Maria stood frozen. Delilah exhaled sharply. Don't mind him. He sees shadows even at noon. But it wasn't just the sheriff. Later that day, when Mariah stepped outside to rock Leo under the shade, she felt it eyes, watching from windows, peeking through curtains. The butcher didn't smile. The general store clerk handed her change like she was contagious. A pair of women whispered as she passed, glancing at Leo with something colder than curiosity. Even children stared, not with malice, but something worse, fear. And in all of it, the same question hung unspoken in every gaze. Who is she? And what's she doing with him? Mariah had never trusted silence, not since Ohio. Silence could hide too many things: lies, traps, the weight of a hand pressing down where it shouldn't. So when she found the old desk drawer in her room wouldn't open, she didn't shrug it off. It was dusk, Leo asleep again, wrapped snug in the quilt Delilah had lent her. A breeze from the cracked window lifted the scent of dust and wild sage. The desk sat beneath that window, rough-hewn, simple, but the middle drawer refused to budge. Curiosity, or maybe the ghost of a schoolteacher's instinct, stirred in her. She reached beneath, fingers brushing the wood, and found it. A notch just behind the support beam. She pressed. The drawer gave a little, then slid open. Inside, paper. Dozens of folded letters bound in twine. She pulled one out and unfolded it with care. The handwriting was neat, feminine. The first line made her breath hitch. To my darling Damas, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. It wasn't a love letter. It was a confession. Another one described a journey west that ended at a cabin with locked doors and no wedding ring. Another pleaded for help. All signed by women, some with full names, others only initials. Some pages bore smudges that might have been tears. All of them spoke of promises broken and freedom stolen. Her fingers trembled. Her eyes blurred. I wasn't the first, she thought, and I won't be the last. She was still holding the last letter when a knock came. Not at the door, at the window. She turned sharply. It was Colt. He stood just beyond the glass, arms crossed, jaw tight. She opened the window a few inches. What is it? His voice was hard. You all right? Before she could answer, a second voice cut in, low, slurred, and far too close. Now what have we got here? Mariah turned. Clyde Mason. Broad-shouldered, sunburnt eyes, red-rimmed from drink. He stood in the hallway, leaning against her open door. Didn't know Rivera was keeping company, he muttered, stepping inside uninvited. Mariah backed away instinctively. Please leave. He grinned, unpleasant and crooked. Just being neighborly. Pretty little thing like you. Someone ought to keep you warm. She reached for Leo's cradle behind her. Before she touched it, the window burst open. Colt. He was through it in a breath, like a shadow that turned to storm. His hand clamped around Clyde's collar, yanked him back so hard the man's boots left the ground. Then a punch. Then another. Clyde hit the floor, blood at his nose, gasping. Mariah stood frozen. Not afraid, but shaken by the violence in Colt's eyes. It wasn't wild. It wasn't loud. It was contained, like a fire that could burn everything if left unguarded. Colt hovered over Clyde for a breath too long. Don't, Mariah said softly. Please, don't. His shoulders rose once, then stilled. Colt stepped back. Clyde crawled out without a word. Silence returned. Colt didn't look at her right away. He adjusted his coat, knuckles scraped. Mariah whispered, You were going to kill him. He nodded once. No apology, just truth. He touched what wasn't his. Then he turned to leave, but she stopped him with a question that came out before she could stop it. Have you done that before? His pause was long. When he finally answered, It was without looking back. Yes, the morning after the incident with Clyde came quiet, too quiet. Mariah hadn't told Delilah what happened. She didn't have to. The woman looked her over at breakfast and simply poured stronger coffee. Leo was fussing again by mid-morning, and Mariah was pacing the hallway when the knock came at the front door. The sound froze her in place. Delilah answered, and there he was, Elias Finch. He looked just as pressed and polished as before, his silver cross gleaming beneath his coat collar, hands folded in front like a proper man of God. "Miss Langley," he said, his voice honeyed, "I heard you've had a rough welcome. I came to offer peace." Mariah said nothing, just held Leo tighter. Elias continued, "There's a place outside town, a camp of sorts, for women like you, those in need of rest, prayer, and a future. We call it the Redemption Grounds." He offered a gentle smile, one that never touched his eyes. "You'd be safer there than among strangers with questionable motives." Delilah's face darkened. Colt stepped in from the hallway, silent as a ghost. His gaze locked on Elias. The Reverend's smile twitched. "Ah, Mr. Rivera, I see you've taken quite the interest in our visitor." Colt didn't reply, didn't blink. Mariah could feel the pressure building in the room like a storm ready to snap. Elias tipped his hat, voice smooth. "The offer stands, Miss Langley, but be wary of wolves in sheep's clothing." Then he left. That afternoon, Colt returned with a horse and a second saddlebag. He didn't speak, just nodded toward the trail outside town. Mariah followed, holding Leo close. They rode in silence through the dry hills, wind-stirring dust devils across the prairie. It wasn't until the road narrowed that Mariah realized where they were headed. A cemetery. Small, fenced with crooked iron, tucked behind a chapel long since fallen to ruin. Colt dismounted and helped her down. He walked to the far end of the graveyard and stopped in front of a weathered stone. Mariah stepped closer, her heart pounding. The name on the marker read, Jameson Carter, beloved son, 1849 to 1875. She stared. "That's the name," she whispered. "The man who was supposed to marry me. He wrote me letters." Colt's jaw tightened. "He's been dead near a year." She felt the blood drain from her face. "Then who?" "Someone's using his name, his story, over and over." Mariah dropped to her knees beside the grave, Leo babbling quietly in her arms. The truth hit harder than any fist. She hadn't escaped the trap. She'd stepped right back into it. That evening, the prairie wind turned cooler. Shadows stretched longer across the yard behind the boarding house, and the sun melted into orange behind the hills. Mariah sat on the steps with Leo in her arms, wrapped in an old wool shawl Delilah had found. The child cooed softly, eyes wide with curiosity, as he tugged at the frayed fringe. Footsteps approached from behind, slow, deliberate. She didn't need to turn. She felt him. Colt stood there a long moment before he finally sat beside her, the wood of the step creaking under his weight. They didn't speak for a while. The silence wasn't heavy, it was respectful, a quiet that let her breathe. Then he said, "You ever had someone taken from you?" Mariah looked up, surprised by the edge in his voice. "My sister," Colt continued, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Elena, 2 years younger, sweetest voice you ever heard. Used to sing to the stars like they owed her a song back." Mariah didn't interrupt. Something in his tone made her chest ache. "She went missing 7 years ago," he said. "Left our land to work as a maid in Santa Fe. Sent one letter. Then nothing." Mariah swallowed hard. "You think she—" "I know she didn't leave by choice." His jaw clenched. "I rode half the territory looking. Tracked rumors, talked to every saloon girl and traveling preacher I could find. Every now and then, I'd find a trail, but it always ended the same. With silence." He finally looked at her. That's why I knew. At the station. The way you held that boy. The fear in your eyes. It's the same look I saw in women who'd escaped places they weren't supposed to. Mariah's throat tightened. She turned her gaze back toward Leo. I didn't know who to trust, she whispered. I still don't. Colt nodded. No offense taken. You shouldn't. Not yet. That honesty, simple, unvarnished, struck her deeper than any promise ever had. She studied his profile in the fading light. The sharp cheekbones, the weathered skin, the quiet sorrow, tucked behind those steady eyes. He was a man shaped by pain, not broken by it. And yet, he'd carried her baby like a cradle was built into his arms, had fought for her like it cost him something. Maybe it had. I'm sorry about Helena, she said. He tipped his head once. Me too. They sat in silence again, the wine tugging at their sleeves. Mariah didn't move closer, but she didn't move away either. And for the first time in a long, long time, she didn't feel like prey in someone else's game. She just felt seen. That night, the air in the boarding house was heavy, not with heat, but with memories no one had asked for. Leo slept soundly in the cradle by the stove. Mariah sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of chamomile tea. She hadn't touched it. Across from her, Delilah leaned back in her chair, the firelight tracing the sharp line of her jaw and the faint scar across her collarbone. Elias Finch, Delilah said, her voice low, steady. That name still makes my skin crawl. Mariah looked up, startled. You know him? Delilah's eyes didn't blink. I knew him before he wore that collar, before he found God, or pretended to. She paused, voice turning brittle. I was 15. Thought I was heading west to become a nanny. What I got instead was a locked room, a broken promise, and a man who said my body was payment for safe passage. Mariah's chest tightened. That was Elias, Delilah nodded. He's clever, keeps his hands clean, smiles with scripture in his mouth, while others do the hurting. But he chooses the girls, picks the roots, builds the lies. A silence fell over the table. Then Delilah said something that made the floor tilt under Mariah's feet. Sheriff Pike knows. Has known. He was there when I escaped. Took a bribe, told me to keep walking and never come back. Mariah felt her breath catch. The room seemed too small, too still. All this time, she whispered, I thought the sheriff was just cold. He's worse, Delilah said. He's useful. And that makes him dangerous. Mariah's arm trembled around the mug. She rose suddenly and stepped out the back door into the night, the wind cool against her face. The world spun with too many truths. She didn't hear Colt follow her until he was standing beside her in the dark. I can't, she began, her voice cracking. I can't keep this all in anymore. Colt said nothing, just stood waiting. Mariah drew a shuddering breath. I was a school teacher, back in Ohio. Respected, quiet. I taught children their letters and king hymns with the rest of them. She laughed bitterly. Then one day the son of the mayor cornered me after class. Said no one would believe me if I screamed. He was right. Colt's fists clenched at his sides. I lost my job, my name. My family turned their back. Then came the pregnancy. Leo. She looked up at him, eyes shining with tears. He's the only good thing I have left, the only thing that's mine. Colt stepped closer, slow and careful. You ain't alone in this, he said. I thought I was. Her voice broke. Until you. He reached out, one hand resting gently on her shoulder, warm, steady and real. Mariah leaned into him, then not as a woman seeking protection, but as one sharing her weight for the first time. And for the first time she didn't feel ashamed. She felt strong. Because he didn't look at her like she was broken. He looked at her like she had survived. Dry Hollow never did like noise, but that Sunday morning, The hush felt different, like the whole town was holding its breath. Elias Finch stood in front of the church house, with a Bible in one hand and a leather-bound ledger in the other. His voice, clear and syrup-smooth, echoed off the clapboard walls as he spoke to a small crowd of women gathered at his feet, all of them alone, all of them desperate. Mariah stood among them. She held Leo close, his weight both anchor and shield. Her dress was plain, her face scrubbed of anything that might hint at the fire she carried beneath. To them, she was just another broken woman, searching for salvation. But today she was bait. "He'll take the first wagon load out at dusk," Delilah had whispered that morning. "Says he's taking them to a new sanctuary in Texas." Yes. Mariah had nodded. She'd volunteered to go. Eyes wide, voice trembling. Just another lamb ready for slaughter. But not this time. Back at the boarding house, Colt had been sharpening his knife in the corner, quiet as always. When she'd told him the plan, he didn't try to stop her. Instead, he looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'll be there." Now standing beneath the church's weathered cross, Mariah watched as Elias smiled and patted each woman's shoulder like a shepherd preparing his flock. She wanted to vomit. Behind her, she caught the faintest nod from Delilah, who stood near the edge, eyes narrowed, hands tucked into the apron she always wore when hiding something sharp. Further down the street, Deputy Will O'Hara, barely out of boyhood, but with a heart too big for his uniform, lingered near the blacksmith's, pretending to inspect a broken horseshoe. And across the dusty lane, a figure perched on a rooftop, Mary McTavish, the widow with a shotgun, and no tolerance for devils in disguise. Mariah tightened her grip on Leo. Elias turned to her, his eyes full of mock kindness. "You'll see, Miss Langley. The Lord provides second chances." She smiled, a small, tight thing that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm counting on it, Reverend." As the sun crept westward, the wagons creaked into the square, their canvas flaps drawn tight. Mariah stepped forward. Tonight, she wouldn't run. Tonight she would burn the whole lie down. Night in Dry Hollow came like a shutter slamming shut, sudden, complete, and suffocating. Mariah waited in the wagon, arms wrapped tight around Leo. Every creak of the wheels, every whisper of wind set her nerves on edge. The wagon jostled forward behind the church where Elias had promised a safer place under starlight. She recognized the path. It didn't lead to salvation. It led to the canyon. And then a whistle. Sharp, pieces. The ambush began. Gunshots cracked like thunder. Hooves pounded the dry earth as figures rushed from every angle. Delilah's voice rang out, fierce and defiant. The widow's shotgun exploded like a cannon. Colt charged in from the trees, a shadow with fire in his hands. Mariah ducked down, covering Leo with her body. Screams erupted. Men shouted, horses screamed. The world turned red in smoke. But then betrayal. Clyde. He stepped from behind the wagon, rifle in hand, and leveled it at Colt. "Apache bastard," he snarled and fired. Colt stumbled, the bullet tearing through his shoulder. Blood bloomed across his shirt. Mariah screamed. Colt stayed on his feet somehow. He grabbed Clyde by the collar and slammed him into the wagon wheel. The traitor crumpled, groaning, but Colt dropped to one knee, breathing hard, blood dripping through his fingers. Elias was gone, vanished into the dark with two of his riders, taking advantage of the chaos. Delilah ran to Colt's side, pressing a cloth to his wound, shouting for help. Mariah crawled out of the wagon, shaking, clutching Leo close. But Leo wasn't there. She gasped. The blanket in her arms was empty. "No, no, no, no," she cried, staggering up, spinning around. "Leo." Then she saw it. Tied to the rear gate of the wagon, flapping in the breeze. A single piece of paper. She tore it down, hands shaking. In bold, deliberate handwriting, "The child will pay for the mother's sins." Mariah's knees buckled. The sound around her horse's fire shouting faded into a dull roar. All she could hear was her heartbeat and the silence where her son should have been. They rode at dawn. Colt's arm was still wrapped in blood-stained linen, his left hand clumsy with the reins. But he didn't flinch, didn't slow. Mariah rode beside him, her skirts tucked up for riding, jaw tight, eyes darker than the storm clouds building over the hills. They said little. What words could match the ache in her chest? Leo was out there, cold alone in the hands of monsters. And the only thing tethering her to sanity was the sound of Colt's horse breathing beside hers. "Tracks head southeast," Colt murmured, squinting into the dust trail. "Toward Apache Mesa. He's got half a day's lead." Mariah nodded. She didn't ask how he knew. By now she trusted the way he read the land like scripture. They camped that night beneath a sandstone bluff. The fire was small, quiet. Colt cooked beans and handed her the tin first as always. She stared at the flames. "You don't ask questions. I ask when folks are ready to answer." She looked up at him then, his face half lit by firelight, strong and still, but his eyes, they never stopped watching. Not with suspicion, with care. "You really think we'll find him?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Colt nodded once. "We'll get your boy back." That we did something to her, reached a part of her she thought was long buried. Later, she woke in the middle of the night, curled in her blanket. She heard Colt stirring nearby, not sleeping, just waiting, guarding. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered into the dark. He didn't answer right away. Then soft and low, "Because someone didn't do it for my sister." Maria sat up. Her voice cracked. "If I lose Leo, you won't." She stretched. Then Colt added, "I've seen what happens when women are left alone to fight wolves. It ends with him." Mariah felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something stronger than fear. A thread of trust. A bond forged not in words, but in dust blood and the silence between heartbeats. Tomorrow, they'd face Elias. Tonight, she let herself believe they might just win. They rode at dawn. Colt's arm was still wrapped in blood-stained linen, his left hand clumsy with the reins. But he didn't flinch, didn't slow. Mariah rode beside him, her skirts tucked up for riding, jaw tight, eyes darker than the storm clouds building over the hills. They said little. What words could match the ache in her chest? Leo was out there, cold alone, in the hands of monsters. And the only thing tethering her to sanity was the sound of Colt's horse breathing beside hers. "Tracks head southeast," Colt murmured, squinting into the dust trail. "Toward Apache Mesa. He's got half a day's lead." Mariah nodded. She didn't ask how he knew. By now she trusted the way he read the land like scripture. They camped that night beneath a sandstone bluff. The fire was small, quiet. Colt cooked beans and handed her the tin first as always. She stared at the flames. "You don't ask questions. I ask when folks are ready to answer." She looked up at him then, his face half lit by firelight, strong and still, but his eyes, they never stopped watching. Not with suspicion, with care. "You really think we'll find him?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Colt nodded once. "We'll get your boy back." That we did something to her, reached a part of her she thought was long buried. Later, she woke in the middle of the night, curled in her blanket. She heard Colt stirring nearby, not sleeping, just waiting, guarding. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered into the dark. He didn't answer right away. Then soft and low, "Because someone didn't do it for my sister." Mariah sat up, her voice cracked. "If I lose Leo, you won't." Silence stretched. Then Colt added, "I've seen what happens when women are left alone to fight wolves. It ends with him." Mariah felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something stronger than fear, a thread of trust, a bond forged not in words but in dust blood, and the silence between heartbeats. Tomorrow they'd face Elias. Tonight she let herself believe they might just win. They found him 2 days later. The ruins of a Spanish mission stood like a ghost against the red rock cliffs. Its bell tower broken doors rotted through, a place forgotten by time, but not by evil. Inside, Elias waited. He stood beneath a shattered stained glass window, Bible still in hand like it might shield him from justice. Leo lay bundled in the corner, unarmed, but crying. Mariah ran to him first, scooping him up, whispering his name like a prayer. Colt approached Elias slowly, eyes dark as thunder. "You took my sister," he said. "You took her, and buried her," with a smile. Elias raised a hand, voice trembling, but still laced with poison. "She chose her fate, like all of them." Colt's fist clenched. "I should kill you." Mariah turned, still holding Leo, her voice sharp. "No, he doesn't get silence. He speaks." Colt stared at Elias. "Say it. Say what you did." For the first time, Elias faltered. "I ran a trade," he admitted. "Girls. Promises, lies. Sheriff Pike kept it quiet. The money kept it going." Colt's blade was at his throat. But he didn't strike. He lowered the knife and tied Elias's hands instead. "Let the law see what hell looks like in daylight." By sundown, a federal marshal had arrived from Santa Fe. Delilah rode with him, face grim and proud. Elias Finch was loaded onto a prison wagon bound for trial. Mariah watched the wheels roll out of sight, Leo in her arms, Colt by her side. For the first time since she stepped off that train, she felt safe. They rode at dawn. Colt's arm was still wrapped in blood-stained linen, his left hand clumsy with the reins. But he didn't flinch, didn't slow. Mariah rode beside him, her skirts tucked up for riding, jaw tight, eyes darker than the storm clouds building over the hills. They said little. What words could match the ache in her chest? Leo was out there, cold alone in the hands of monsters. And the only thing tethering her to sanity was the sound of Colt's horse breathing beside hers. "Tracks head southeast," Colt murmured, squinting into the dust trail. "Toward Apache Mesa. He's got half a day's lead." Mariah nodded. She didn't ask how he knew. By now she trusted the way he read the land like scripture. They camped that night beneath a sandstone bluff. The fire was small, quiet. Colt cooked beans and handed her the tin first, as always. She stared at the flames. "You don't ask questions. I ask when folks are ready to answer." She looked up at him then, his face half lit by firelight, strong and still, but his eyes, they never stopped watching. Not with suspicion, with care. "You really think we'll find him?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Colt nodded once. "We'll get your boy back." That we did something to her, reached a part of her she thought was long buried. Later, she woke in the middle of the night, curled in her blanket. She heard Colt stirring nearby, not sleeping, just waiting, guarding. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered into the dark. He didn't answer right away. Then soft and low, "Because someone didn't do it for my sister." Maria sat up. Her voice cracked. "If I lose Leo, you won't." Valency stretched. Then Colt added, "I've seen what happens when women are left alone to fight wolves. It ends with him." Mariah felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something stronger than fear. A thread of trust. A bond forged not in words, but in dust blood and the silence between heartbeats. Tomorrow, they'd face Elias. Tonight, she let herself believe they might just win. They found him 2 days later. The ruins of a Spanish mission stood like a ghost against the red rock cliffs. Its bell tower broken doors rotted through, a place forgotten by time, but not by evil. Inside, Elias waited. He stood beneath a shattered stained glass window, Bible still in hand like it might shield him from justice. Leo lay bundled in the corner unarmed, but crying. Mariah ran to him first, scooping him up, whispering his name like a prayer. Colt approached Elias slowly, eyes dark as thunder. "You took my sister," he said. "You took her, and buried her with a smile." Elias raised a hand, voice trembling, but still laced with poison. "She chose her fate, like all of them." Colt's fist clenched. "I should kill you." Mariah turned, still holding Leo, her voice sharp. "No. He doesn't get silence. He speaks." Colt stared at Elias. "Say it. Say what you did." For the first time, Elias faltered. "I ran a trade," he admitted. "Girls. Promises, lies. Sheriff Pike kept it quiet. The money kept it going." Colt's blade was at his throat. But he didn't strike. He lowered the knife and tied Elias's hands instead. "Let the law see what hell looks like in daylight." By sundown, a federal marshal had arrived from Santa Fe. Delilah rode with him, face grim and proud. Elias Finch was loaded onto a prison wagon bound for trial. Mariah watched the wheels roll out of sight, Leo in her arms, Colt by her side. For the first time since she stepped off that train, she felt safe. Colt spent 3 days in bed, feverish and half-conscious, the wound in his shoulder refusing to quiet. Mariah never left his side. She boiled water, crushed herbs. Delilah brought in paper pouches, wiped his brow with gentle hands. When Leo cried, she sang softly for both her boys. Outside, the town began to shift. Sheriff Pike was arrested the same night Elias was taken. Delilah stood before the townsfolk, told her truth, and didn't flinch. She used the boarding house money to open a safe haven, a place for women like her, like Mariah. The sign read, "The Crow House, no one forgotten." Word spread. And for once, Dry Hollow listened. Mariah was asked to teach again, not just letters and sums, but strength too. Little girls stared at her with wide eyes. Little boys asked about Leo. And Colt, when he could walk again, started laying logs by the river bend, not far from his horses. "Just a roof and a porch," he said. "Maybe a swing for Leo." Mariah smiled. "And a chair for you." Colt looked at her. "Only if there's one beside it for you." She didn't answer, just reached down, lifted Leo into his arms, and leaned against Colt's good shoulder. The sun was setting behind them, warm and wide. For the first time, home wasn't a place. It was a feeling. And it had finally found them.